I haven't been able to fully flex or extend my right arm in nearly 10 years. Here's why. It wasn't a singular event that led to this loss of function, but rather a series of events and cumulative trauma, both direct and indirect. The first incident came from getting viciously armbarred by some butt-hurt brown belt I had previously submitted. I was a white belt at the time, and I caught him slipping and triangled this guy, and he got tight. He angrily tapped. We reset back to neutral, and then he proceeded to nastily armbar me twice in succession. Kind of a shitty move on his part, but hey, you play a man's game, you pay a man's price. That was just the beginning of the end. The most recent event was about 2 years ago. Somebody caught me in a head and arm choke, and I did the answer the telephone defense. And that's kind of a bullshit defense if you really know what you're doing, but it will buy you some time. And he proceeded to just squeeze my head and arm so tightly that my elbow went into like a hyperflexion, and I felt stuff moving around in there. And that, I think, is really what caused the lack of full flexion. And in between these two events, there were just years of cumulative stress and run-of-the-mill trauma that we experience on the mats. Grappling demands that we spend a ton of time in elbow flexion, particularly terminal flexion, like this really end-range flexion. And I hypothesize that all of that time in flexion under mechanical stress leads to a thickening or hypertrophy of the tendons that flex the elbow. There's a lot of potential contributors that can lead to loss of function at the elbow, particularly things like osteophyte formation. Osteophytes are bony growths that can occur from repeated end ranges. Capsular thickening and fibrosis can also be an issue. Years of microtrauma can stiffen the capsule. This will feel springy, not sharp and painful. And if there is a loss of function minus pain, that kind of screams structural change. Chronic synovitis is low-grade inflammation from constant shear stressors. Here, your elbow can stay puffy even when things are kind of calm. The swelling is actually what steals range of motion. A cue for this can be morning stiffness that dissipates after things warm up a bit. Cartilage breakdown is also a concern. This can look like focal degeneration rather than global arthritis. Loose bodies can also be a concern. Old cartilage or osteophyte fragments can break off and float around. This can cause sudden catching or feeling blocked, and motion might vary from day to day. And if that wasn't enough, all of the above can lead to an earlier onset of osteoarthritis. By doing Jiu Jitsu, I've accomplished in nearly 20 years what takes most men 60, arthritis in half my body. By now, it should seem pretty clear that there's a lot that can go wrong with the elbow. They take a beating on the mats. So what should you be doing to learn from my mistakes? The solution to minimizing or avoiding elbow injury altogether is multi-pronged. The first step of which is adopting a preventative mindset. And for this to happen, you have to pay the ego tax. I know, another insufferable jiu-jitsu guy talking about checking your ego at the door, but hear me out. When forces exceed tissue tolerance, injuries occur. Joint locks can be nasty, and by the time you feel pain, there's likely already been some micro trauma that's occurred. As older grapplers, our tendons are not as elastic as a 20-year-old's. Tapping when you feel pressure, not pain, might save you 6 months of rehab. This is easier said than done. The better you get at jiu-jitsu, the more options you have for escape. This isn't a lecture. You're an adult, and you're going to accept whatever risk you feel comfortable with. For me personally, I don't try and fight out of fully locked-in submissions. This might seem rather obvious, but I know more than one of you know what I'm talking about. Somebody could have ticked all of their boxes, and the end is nigh, and here I am still trying to fight out of a submission. Just accept it and move on. This is especially true for you brown and black belts out there. If we're rolling and you catch me slipping and shit's about to get real, I tap, especially on this right arm. I'm really glad I shared that. Now everybody and their mother is going to be hunting for my right elbow. It's really as simple as that. Rule number 2 is fortification. You may have heard the term motion is lotion. Ew. But load is the cure. Also ew. Passive stretching alone is likely not going to lead to significant changes. Tissue remodels along the lines of stress. We have to load them. And end range strengthening is exactly what you'll need if you want to improve function. The great news is that you can accomplish this with everybody's favorite exercises, bicep curls and tricep extensions. When it comes to the elbow, these are functional as fuck. You can add in some pronation and supination as well as some wrist extension and flexion, but keep in mind that since this is a load capacity issue, throwing more load at it isn't necessarily going to solve the problem, especially if you're already experiencing some tendinopathy. Here, the goal is to reduce inflammation and temporarily modify your activity until things calm down a bit. If this is you, then let me know in the comments. Perhaps I'll make a series on medial and lateral elbow tendinopathy. The other exercises I highly recommend are shoulder external rotations. You might be asking, Adam, what does the shoulder have to do with the elbow? And that's our third rule. Treat the shoulder to save the elbow. The biceps are a two-joint muscle. They cross both the shoulder and the elbow. If I'm locked up at the shoulder, I'm going to seek that mobility elsewhere, and the elbow is the next available neighbor in the upper kinetic chain. Primarily, the biceps do elbow flexion and supination, but they also play a secondary role in assisting in shoulder flexion. If the biceps are already shortened at both ends, as is the case in most BJJ scenarios, this can lead to something called active insufficiency. Think defending an arm lock, for example. Imagine I'm on my back right now. My shoulder is flexed at about 90 degrees, my elbow is flexed, and I'm defending this arm lock so that you can't rip my shit off. When the muscle is shortened at both ends, I can't contract forcefully. This also leads to movement restriction. The shoulder is the most mobile joint in the body, and with great power comes great responsibility. The more mobility I have at the shoulder, the less demand I place on the elbow when seeking movement strategies. Here are 3 exercises in my shoulder care routine that also stretch the bicep. This is a prone scorpion. We can hold this in a static position anywhere from 60 to 120 seconds, or we can rep it out back and forth if our goal is to just warm up and shake it out. Next up is the kettlebell armbar. Don't worry, it's the good kind. Notice how I'm rotating the bell in and out. Here, I'm targeting the internal and external rotators of the rotator cuff. There's no need to go heavier than 12 to 16 kilos, or 25 to 35 freedom units. Any heavier than that, then we run the risk of the more powerful muscles like the pec and the lat taking over. The door stretch is a very common exercise that you could do anytime, anywhere. To stretch the sternal fibers of the pec, you're going to place your elbows at around 90 degrees. And to stretch the costal fibers, you're going to place them up a little bit higher, around 120 degrees. All of these serve to lengthen the chronically tight muscles that we get in Jiu Jitsu. This is very good for fighting, but it's pretty much shit for everything else. Now, not to get all corny, but Jiu Jitsu has given me so much in life. Community, purpose, and a never-ending quest to be just a little bit better than I was yesterday. And if you feel the same way, then it becomes incredibly important to do anything I possibly can to make sure I stay on the mats for the long haul. If I could turn back time, I'd have implemented these things a lot sooner in my practice. And if you have yet to experience any of the stuff that I've gone through, I strongly encourage you to start to adopt this stuff now. Thanks for checking this out. If you have any questions about anything, hit me up in the comments.